Coming up on today's edition of Locked On Eagles, we have an update on the injury of Jalen Hurts. Also, stock up, stock down after a close 25-20 win on Sunday over the Chicago Bears. All that and more on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to a Tuesday edition of the show. I'm Louis DiBiase. He's Gino Camilleri. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the App Store. Our listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code LOCKEDON, all caps, in the game store. It's a Tuesday edition of the show, which of course always means stock up, stock down. After a 25-20 win over the Chicago Bears, the Eagles are now 13-1, one win away from clinching the first seed in the NFC and the NFC East Division Championship. Gino, they might have to do it, though, on Christmas Eve against the Dallas Cowboys without their starting quarterback in Jalen Hurts. We'll see if he does play, but yesterday there was a little bit of panic on Eagles Twitter for at least like 2 to 3 minutes. There was a report out there about an injury to Jalen Hurts. There were some misfired reports about like a broken collarbone. People were scared, like, oh my gosh, this is a long-term injury. Then Jimmy Kempski came out with a report that they had done x-rays on Jalen Hurts' shoulder, but there was no news about what the injury was. So for a minute there, we're thinking, oh my gosh, 5 years and 9 days removed from the lead MVP, Carson Wentz, tearing his ACL. We might be going through this all over again. There was a minute there, I'm like, do I have to convince myself Gardner Minshew is Nick Foles? Like, can we do this again like in 2017? Luckily, we're not there. Jalen Hurts is injured, but not as serious as maybe some thought. He has a sprained shoulder, doubtful for this game against Dallas. But, Gino, normally this is like a 1 to 3 week injury, and depending on what the Eagles do against Dallas, he may rest until the postseason, or he may play against the Cowboys or the Saints. So luckily, though, you're going to have him for the Super Bowl run. And that was, Eagles fans, we're used to our quarterbacks getting hurt, right? So for a minute, our toxic traits came back there for a sec.
Would it be a Philadelphia Eagles season without some
I was
sort
like,
of
it makes so much sense. I'm like, if he's out, this is just exactly how it's supposed to be.
Yeah, the Hollywood sports writers once again got their wish that they get this incredible story to tell, but
the same trope,
luckily,
the same trope.
Quite literally the same thing. I mean, the remake isn't usually as good as the original. We know that. And when you look at Jalen Hurts, for his ability to play through that injury, and I think most people knew it when he sat down there for that extra couple seconds. And even Jordan Mailata thought something was up too. But Jalen Hurts, what a warrior, man. He doesn't let his teammates know that he even has a knock on him. Goes out and throws that game-winning dime to A.J. Brown down the sidelines with a sprained shoulder.
And it was on his – there was a, back and forth reports about if it was his non-throwing shoulder or his right throwing shoulder.
His throwing shoulder.
Yeah,
sure.
And he went, after the injury, 6 of 9 for 102 yards, including that 68-yard bomb you were talking about. Also 6 rushing attempts for 9 yards and a touchdown.
Unbelievable. And for him to sit this week, it could be a blessing in disguise to give him a little bit of rest going into the playoffs here. But ultimately, this is an injury where it comes down to pain management. I'm one who likes to jinx things. I think he's going to play. I have a weird inkling that they might try to be doing some head games with Dallas. I don't know. We never know with the Eagles. But if Gardner Minshew is going to go, we have another good news story that Dallas Goedert is activated off of the IR. He's going to be playing this weekend. If you talk about everything set up to beat Dallas, even without your star quarterback, this team can do it.
They can do it, man, for sure.
They absolutely can. If the front four plays as well as they have been, if those weapons get open and give Gardner time, the reason you invest in Gardner Minshew is for this exact scenario. People need to get over that they ran their quarterback too many times. They've ran their quarterback too many times the past 30 years.
They've been
ahead of the 8 ball.
Yeah, that's the risk of a mobile quarterback. We know that in Philadelphia more than anybody. Randall Cunningham was injured. They needed Jim McMahon. Donovan McNabb went down. They needed Jeff Garcia and AJ Feely. Michael Vick goes down. We needed Kevin Cobb and Nick Foles. Carson Wentz goes down. We needed Nick Foles. Jalen Hurts goes down. You need Gardner Minshew. This is the risk. If you want a guy that can do both things, throw and run, like we want, you need that in the NFL. This is just the reality. Even Jalen Hurts, who's one of the most safe mobile quarterbacks in the league, he's still subject to get hit in the open field. So it's the reality, and the Eagles know that more than anybody, but I still wouldn't change it. This is the kind of player I want. You have to invest more in the backup quarterback position, and Gardner Minshew, with the weapons they have, should be just fine for a game or two.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what you wanted Gardner Minshew to be when you brought him in here for. I still can't believe how little of a pick they gave up to get him for a player who now could clinch the first round bye for you, and it's not even your starting quarterback. And the drop off, it will be there. You won't be able to do a lot of the athletic things, get him outside of the pocket.
Hurts is the lead MVP candidate right now, so
we know that. But Minshew, he is a timing based quarterback. He is somebody who can fit balls into tight windows. And if you want to talk about Hollywood sports writers coming off of the passing of Mike Leach, who was Gardner Minshew's coach
that's a cool story
for all those years at Washington State. Now he gets a chance to go out there on the biggest stage and arguably the biggest game, play the game of his life, Lou. If anybody's going to step up to the table, I believe it's Gardner Minshew. You know how much he lives and dies by football. You saw how cool it was with his dad after that Jets game when they won, seeing that reaction. This guy is going to leave it all out on the football field. And I couldn't be happier for all parties involved because, as I said, it could be a blessing in disguise that you get an additional week of rest for Jalen going into the playoffs. And if you look back at 2004, they rested those starters 2 weeks and routed Minnesota in the divisional playoff game.
Yeah,
so
it's
rest,
going to be interesting.
It can be overblown. And you look at rest, talk about guys in college, Lou, they go a month plus without playing a game before the national championship. Jalen Hurts has been in that scenario before. I don't think that's going to be something.
And his preparation, too, is so incredible that I'm not expecting much rust. But at the same time, it will be interesting to see what they do. Like, if you beat Dallas and you clinch, do you sit Jalen Hurts against New Orleans, against New York, and then you have a bye week? In that scenario, he doesn't play it for 5 weeks. And yeah, I guess it just depends on how much stock you put into. Are you scared about any sort of rust factor? But let's say, Gino, they lose to the Cowboys. Minshew loses in a close game, right? But Dak Prescott and Dallas, they pull it out, right? I feel like at that point, Hurts probably plays against the Saints because you don't want to risk going into week 18 and you still don't have the 1 seed of the division locked up, right? Obviously Dallas could lose that following week and, that clinches it for you as well. But if they lose this game, especially too with the Saints pick, you wanting that to be higher as well, there's even more incentive to play Hurts in that game. I think if this game right here against Dallas, like if the Eagles lost against Chicago or the Cowboys beat the Jaguars, I would agree with you even more that Hurts probably plays. I think they have more flexibility because they only need one more win to lock everything up. So we'll see what happens week by week. I am curious to see how they approach this. Even if they clinch, though, I'd like to see at least a drive or two, maybe a tune-up against the Giants, just to get him some more reps because I do want him to play a little bit, and so there's not a 5-week span where – because he's in such a rhythm right now. I want to keep that going, man. I mean, I hope he doesn't lose the MVP because of this, considering what he's done at 13-1, but we'll see.
Ultimately, the goal is the team award, which is the Super Bowl. We know that.
I just hate that, like, the odds drop to, like, plus 200 now. It's like they're 13-1, and they've pretty much got everything locked up, and he's been the MVP. Why now? Because he doesn't play in a few maybe meaningless games. Suddenly Mahomes is the guy? That logic, and I know it's probably true, but it doesn't make sense to me.
You want to talk about solidifying those odds, though. If Gardner does lose this week and Jalen comes back and wins against New Orleans, I think you can all but wrap that up. And the landscape of this game, it definitely could get blown out of proportion a little bit, and they have to control what they can control. But the good news is, Lou, that's not the only option to win this game to get the one. If Minnesota, San Fran, and Dallas lose any of their last 3 games, they're going to get the 1 seed. But we would like to handle what we can handle. That's always been the Philadelphia Eagles motto. It just makes it a little more difficult when you don't have the guy who's arguably a top 2 quarterback in the football, in NFL this year.
But they're going to have him for the playoffs. We don't have to convince ourselves 2017 and 2018 can happen all over
Nate
again.
Sudfeld.
Everybody can take a deep, sigh of relief. Jalen Hurts is not going anywhere in 2022. Coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles, guys, it's time for Stock Up, Stock Down. Who shined and who struggled in that 25-20 win over the Chicago Bears? We'll get into that coming up next. Today's episode of Locked On Eagles is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. We're really geeked out about our new partner and sponsor of the show, the mobile game Ultimate Football GM. Ever dream of becoming an NFL general manager and managing your football franchise? Well, your dream can come true, and this game is definitely for you. Manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through the season, and lead your team to glory. You're responsible for hiring the right coaches and coordinators, trading players, making draft picks, navigating your franchise through free agency and the draft, all the ups and downs of a season, all in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want, when you want it, wherever you want it. Also, we have a lockdown league right now, so it's been a lot of fun to, navigate through Ultimate Football GM together with everybody in the NFL channel. Locked On Eagles listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when you use the promo code LOCKEDON. That's all caps, LOCKEDON, in the game store. That's Locked On, so make sure you check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the App Store. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. And Eagles fans, today's show is also presented by Turo. Turo is the world's largest car-sharing marketplace. With Turo, you can book any car you want, wherever you want it. From a community of local hosts, browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion or budget across the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia. Book a spacious SUV or minivan for a family road trip. Get a classic or luxury car for a special event, birthday, or holiday. Even find that affordable economy car for your budget if you just got to get from point A to B. And hey, test drive that new electric vehicle you've had your eye on too. Many Turo hosts can even deliver the car right to you. Every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms and conditions and exclusions apply. Forget boring rental cars and find your drive at Turo.com. I'm Louis DiBiase. He's Gino Camilleri. Thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Make sure to check out as well the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories around the sports world in 20 minutes or less, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and Locked On's take of the day. We are recapping still the Eagles win on Sunday against the Bears, 25-20. They're 13-1 on the year. Gino, we didn't even really talk about it in segment one because, Jalen Hurts is injured and we had to get into, what's next. But he played great, I think, after overcoming those 2 interceptions. So I still say it's a stock up day for Jalen, but he also was helped a lot by his 2 wide receivers. I mean, we got to say stock up to A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith. The tear that these guys have been on since Dallas Goedert is injured. I tweeted out the other day, and I think it was people kind of misinterpreted what I meant. I said, don't normalize what Smith and Brown have been doing this past month. Like, soak it in. It's been so long since the Eagles have had weapons like this. And all I meant by that was, yes, this is going to be normally now an every week occurrence where these 2 are dominating, but don't let it yet just be like, yep, that's what they do, and just kind of bypass it. Enjoy this, because if you could tell Gino of 2020 and Lou of 2019, the Eagles would have these kind of players for their 24-year-old quarterback, we'd be over the moon. So, Gino, I'm still kind of in the honeymoon phase with this. Like, I can't believe the Eagles still have multiple receivers that can blow up like they are doing. It's incredible.
And I think all of us as Eagles supporters are trauma bonding over this as well, because we saw Terrell Owens do the same exact thing and then leave a year later. So
I think we're trauma bonding with corners too, man. Just these 2 duos we have, we are trauma bonding for sure.
Absolutely. And in the best way possible too, because you are talking about 2 wide receivers who aren't only just playing at a career best level themselves, they're playing at a franchise best level for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Right.
A.J. Brown in his first season surpasses what Terrell Owens did there in 2004. Mm-hmm. He is on a tear. DeVonta Smith is well on his way to reaching 1,000 yards. All at the hands of the guy who brought them here, Howie Roseman, seeing the mistake of watching Carson Wentz throw for 4,000 yards and not have a wide receiver go for over 500 in that year. And outside of just some outlier games in the last couple of years, the Alshon Jeffrey Miami game, for example, where he goes for over 150. These 100-yard outings from receivers is something that we haven't seen consistently. So like you said, don't normalize this. This doesn't happen all the time for the Eagles,
Right.
but now they have the guys that can do it. So to a degree, it should be normalized. We should expect this, but at the same time, we shouldn't take it for granted because
I just mean emotionally,
like
make sure this isn't just like, whatever. This is just what the Eagles do now. Like, yes, it's true. And they're only 25 and 24. They're not going anywhere, but I'm still trying to enjoy this as much as possible. Cause I remember when you didn't have this and all you dreamed about was having these kind of players. Yeah, you're right, man. Devonta Smith's going to hit 1,000. He's at 901 right now. He needs 99 more yards in 3 games. So he's going to hit that mark. 71 catches, surpasses last year's 64 reception mark. It's incredible to see what he's done stepping up for Dallas Goedert. Not that he was having a down year before Dallas was injured, but I mean, just since Goedert got hurt, Devonta Smith against the Colts, 6 for 78, against the Packers, 4 for 50, against the Titans, 5 for 102 and a touchdown, against the Giants, 5 for 64 and a touchdown. Then this past week against Chicago, 5 for 126. And it's the yards per catch that have soared. Right? Because before Goedert got hurt, it was like 8.8 1 week, 4.6, 8.7, 5.7. Lately, it was 25.2 against the Bears, 20.4 3 weeks ago against the Titans, 13, 12.5, 12.8. The efficiency down the field is also spiked. So Smith overall is just cooking the last month.
A friend over at Locked On Packers, Peter Bukowski, a couple weeks ago, prior to me hopping on the Locked On Sports Today podcast, made a comment that it just stuck with me. He said, last year you saw the offense and the limitations of Devonta Smith being wide receiver number 1. And that kind of got to me because I said, well, he was a rookie. And now you're seeing the development of him without Dallas Goedert being there. The evolution of this kid is tremendous, and it's an outlier in and of itself because he's 170 pounds and nobody has ever performed at that level in his body adjustment and his ability to get his hands outside his frame and his control with his feet to just know where the sideline is. This kid is a bona fide wide receiver 1 all day, every day. And the thing that we never had was that complement of receivers outside of the Macklin and Deshaun Jackson couple of years that we had. Even with T.O., it's still Todd Pigston. It's still James Thrash. You never had that 1A, 1B. If A.J. Brown goes out, I have all the confidence in the world that Devonta Smith steps up to that wide receiver 1. He can beat your number 1 corner any day of the week. He could do it inside. He could do it outside. And just to have those two mimic what each other does, because of the quarterback's, let's say, weaknesses that have now been propelled to his strengths, they have made Jalen Hurts better, and Jalen Hurts has made them better.
100%.
And just having those three together, now bringing back Dallas Goedert, that is the foundation, Lou. That is the 4 corners of your house. You put up the concrete around it. You build around those 4. That's what you're just going to continue to do while these guys are still on rookie contracts with Devontae, with AJ, who he's still on his rookie contract, which is the craziest part. His extension
doesn't kick in until next year. I know that's the thing. Even like all offseason, Gino, there was all this hype about the Eagles adding a receiver, right? And everybody wanted one. But we would also make the case like, yes, you want another receiver in this room. You need one. But of course, we'll take an A.J. Brown for sure. It makes your team better, as we've seen. But we said, you don't need to have like another star. We believe that Devonta Smith can be your wide receiver 1. We were okay with adding a Calvin Ridley or, at the right price, Allen Robinson or Robert Woods, because we believe that Devonta could be that guy. Obviously, you take A.J. Brown over those players. Like you want that luxury. But yeah, we always believed that he could be wide receiver 1. I think he proved that even as a rookie. I think the limitations were that he wasn't getting the ball enough. So he's getting it enough lately. 5 receptions at least in 4 of the last 5 weeks. He is completely dominating, as is A.J. Brown. Gino, continuing here with offseason additions. Number 1 is just overall the pass rush continues to dominate. Another 6-sack performance, but Hassan Riddick, and of course Josh Sweat has 2 sacks in that game. Javon Hargrave as well. He hits 10 sacks this year. But Hassan Riddick was everywhere in that football game. It's incredible. Obviously Brandon Graham's been one of the most underrated pass rushers of the last decade. But I feel like Reddick is the first guy since like Trent Cole that's just like a sack monster. You know what I mean? Like you're just going to rack up the numbers with this guy. I mean, only TJ Watt and Myles Garrett have more sacks in the last 3 years. And he was all over Justin Fields on Sunday. That explosiveness we haven't seen in a long time off the edge.
And Myles Garrett and TJ Watt have played in the same system for the same defensive coordinators.
Yeah, exactly.
Playing the same position. This kid, Hassan Riddick, has done it for 3 different teams, for 3 different coordinators, 3 different head coaches, and 3 different schemes year over year over year. That in and of itself is a complete, just unbelievable accomplishment to not have any hesitation to learn that next defense, to hop in there and be confident in yourself. There was no stretch like Chauncey had, right, where the first 5 games you're trying to get into it. Hassan was ready. They got him back in March. He came in. He was prepared. He came out of the gate so hot, and his addition has elevated everybody else because all around that defensive line, they are close to hitting 4 guys going above 10 sacks, which, Lou, you talk about the wide receivers doing what they're doing. Soak this in, folks. They have already doubled those numbers of sacks over last year. We've only seen numbers like this a couple times throughout Eagles history, and those are the great of the great teams.
You gotta go back to the 80s and the 90s with Reggie White, Clyde Simmons, and those guys.
The 89 year with Buddy Ryan was the year with sacks, and this is right there with them. And Javon Hargrave is going to secure a bag somewhere in free agency. Josh Sweat continues to be a top 10 player at the position, which nobody is talking about. Fletcher Cox remains hot. We got to talk about Cox. He didn't get a sack, but there was one play where he took that guard and walked him from the line.
I know exactly what play you're talking about. He was
Hurts.
using him as Justin Fields is he was trying to almost move the guard where Fields was trying to scramble. He was using the guard to block that lane. I know exactly what play you're talking about.
These guys just continue to dominate, and even the role players like Patrick Johnson has looked good in there in rotational minutes. Milton Williams as well. By one addition, Lou, look at how good everybody else has become because you upgraded over Jannard Avery. Brandon Graham is filled into that Kerrigan role. That makes everybody else better.
It's helped
when people
everybody
are playing in their natural positions.
Hassan Riddick is the only player this year, Gino, with at least 12 sacks, at least 4 forced fumbles, and at least 3 fumbles recovered. I mean, outside of Jalen Hurts and maybe A.J. Brown, you could argue that Hassan Riddick is the MVP of this season. I mean, he has been an incredible addition from Howie Roseman. They had a plan for this guy the minute he came in. Jonathan Gannon and Howie were on the exact same page. He was the perfect player for what they were looking for. So stock up to Hassan Riddick and that entire defensive line. 3 straight weeks now where they have at least 6 sacks on the day. Gino, before we take a break too, shout out to another one of the role players. You know, you were talking about role players there. How about K'Von Wallace stepping in at safety? This is the first time we kind of saw the my guy that we liked coming out of Clemson. I mean, he was flying downhill, getting after Justin Fields and David Montgomery, led the team in tackles with 7. He finally looked a little bit like that player we liked in college, man. And that was big. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson injured, Reed Blankenship injured. You needed him out there, and he really stepped up for sure. I was impressed.
I think they found a role, and that's what you've gotten out of Josiah Scott as well, a player that you can put in there, and he was in there a little bit in that game against Chicago. And what K'Von Wallace can do is he can be that player that he was at Clemson, which is shocking because you try to play him out of position a little bit. You try to have him excel in the pass game, which he really doesn't do that well. But one thing he does is that he could track sideline to sideline, take exceptional angles. When he takes good angles and he gets to the ball carrier, he is going to put them down, which we saw on Sunday. And that's what you need in these stretch runs where guys do go down. And we don't know when Chauncey is going to come back. Hopefully it is for the playoffs, but that lacerated kidney, that's a big deal. And now you're sitting there and Anthony Harris is your next man up. Talk about stepping up to the occasion. K'Von Wallace did just that, and I know that a lot of people have been hard on K'Von Wallace, myself especially, but the trust that Jonathan Gannon has to keep putting him out there, knowing that he is eventually going to hit and have that big game. Well, we just saw it the other day. And man, I love seeing these guys that maybe have been written off several times come back and just bite us in the rear end. Like we wrote off Jalen Hurts more than anybody. Oh, now he's having an MVP caliber season. Like
we love the improvement, man, for sure. And Wallace hasn't stepped up for years. That was finally the game where he was making impact plays and he looked like that guy for sure. So stock up to K'Von Wallace. Hopefully he keeps that going until CGJ can come back into the lineup. Gino, stock down coming up next. Got a few players and some coaches we'll talk about that struggled in that game against the Bears.
Before we do that, this episode of Locked On Eagles is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy where you pick 2 to 5 players. You're going to say, are they going to go above or below the Prize Picks projection? And if you do, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. And if you've played the other daily fantasy sites, you're competing against 5, 10, 25,000 people. No, you're just competing against yourself over at Prize Picks. You pick those players in any sport you can imagine: NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, disc golf, Euro basketball, cricket. It goes on and on and on. You can make those entries in less than 60 seconds. It's operational in over 30 states and Canada. And all you have to do is, let's say you choose A.J. Brown. You're going to say he's going to go over his Prize Picks projection. Oh, guess what he does? You win some money, and you could get some additional money over at Prize Picks today. Go to prizepicks.com or take your mobile device, sign up, and you can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 by using the promo code LOCKEDON. So what does that mean? You put in $100, Prize Picks will give you 100. You put in 50, they will give you 50. Use that promo code LOCKEDON at sign up today and get in on the action. All of us here at Locked On NFL are using Prize Picks for our daily fantasy football fun.
All right, everybody, we're wrapping up this Tuesday edition of Locked On Eagles. Gino Camilleri and Lou DiBiase. It's time for Stock Down, Gino, after that 25-20 win on Sunday over the Chicago Bears. It's been a few weeks since we've done Stock Down because the Eagles have had such dominating performances against the Packers and the Titans and the Giants. They've been red hot, really, since that loss to the Commanders and overcoming that, late deficit against the Colts. They have been off and running. They've looked as good as they even did early on in the season when they were undefeated. But there were a few, reasons the Bears were in that game on Sunday. And I think number one, stock down definitely to the offensive play calling, at least early on. I think we both agreed about this after the game, that it just felt way too aggressive. I don't want to say pass happy because I like being a pass first team, especially against a bad defense, but it just felt like they were going for the kill shot every play, and it was like the first drive or two. And I think overall there needs to be more of a balance there. And I'm glad they overcame it in the second half, but the offense, even on like 3rd and 2, they're running go routes, and it just, I don't know. It was a head scratching performance from Shane Steichen early on.
You know what this reminded me of? You remember the Washington Week 1 game when they drafted Jalen Reagor and they threw about 97 go balls in that game?
Yeah, 2020. Yep.
Just failed to set up the run. It was just
pent up. They just wanted to use all the speed they finally had.
Exactly. And that's what it felt like against Chicago, where it's like,
yeah,
if we ran it 2 or 3 times, set up a play action, we probably could have opened things up on the back end a little bit easier.
Because the deep ball worked in the second half. I get wanting to go for it. It was just the amount of times and like the situations, it was weird.
And not using the thing about it is like, if Miles was a 50 to 60 yard back a game, I get it, but he's popping off week after week.
Right, he's on fire right now. Yeah,
he's on fuego. I mean,
and the Bears are 27th against the run too. So
yeah, that's the thing that the Eagles have done well the last month or so, is knowing what the weaknesses of their opponents are. When you go out against Green Bay, you rush for 363 yards. You're thinking that's a similar game plan. They're not like Tennessee, who's just god awful against the pass. I mean, Jalen Johnson, he's a decent corner. He played okay. Things opened up towards the end, but how do you get that going? I think instilling your toughness and instilling your will against an opponent of that caliber, that's the kill shot. Just not wanting to come out snap after snap where you're playing that offensive line. They impose your will on them. You started to set up the run in the third quarter when they knew what the purpose of that was. It was to open up the pass, which
and then it worked.
Did. And what happened, because you had such confusing play calling, Jalen Hurts inevitably gets hurt in that game and took way too many hits. The first time you saw Jalen get hit in that game, you should have been like, okay, maybe
they were
ball off to Miles a little.
Even just the kind of hits he was taking, like he absorbs a lot of, he gets tackled every game very consistently. A lot of these read option plays or QB draws, they're up the middle for sure. But at the same time, it was like the Bears were thumping them. You know what I mean? It just felt like they were putting everything into each hit.
They knew they had to take them out of that game.
Yeah, exactly. So I wouldn't say the play calling was awful, because even in the second half, it felt like they were ready for every kind of blitz package Chicago gave, right? With the draws, and they saw a blitz come out on the right side. What do? Screen pass to Devante Smith. The play calling got better in the second half. I should say really more so stock down to the first half play calling.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think it's the balance. Like, why we get away from the idea that you can go an easy 50-50 split run and pass in the first half. I get the second half, you can make your adjustments, do what you have to do. But in the first half, you know that you have an elite pass offense and an elite run game. You can't tie one hand behind your back and fight with your off hand. Like, have both hands available and ready to roll. There's no reason to hinder yourself and not use that run game, especially because you've done it against guys and teams that have top-level rush defenses.
Mm-hmm. And then, Gino, I'd say stock down too. Quez Watkins really struggled in that game, and I felt like it kind of goes hand in hand. Felt like more of a early 2021 kind of strategy where they, instead of using the run game to provide balance for the deep ball, it was more of the reverses and the, pre-snap motion, screen passes to Quez Watkins. I love getting Quez more involved in those kind of plays. We've said all year we'd like to see more of that, but it clearly wasn't working early on, and it felt like he just kept getting those touches, and every time it was a 1 or 2 yard play. The Bears were ready for it all game.
This Eagles team has one downfall to them, and I think it's the idea that they don't get north as quick as they should. There's times, even A.J. Brown does it, where he's looking to make that next play and try to dance sideways, but you inevitably get tackled a yard short of the first down marker. With Quez, if he just gets vertical, he's going to beat anybody in a foot race. I don't know why he tries to dance. That was his thing. He did that on the couple jet sweeps that they did with him. He's trying to stretch it more than he is trying to get north and south. And that was what hindered Miles for a little bit early on in this season, to where now he's foot in the ground, get upfield and go. That's how you're going to beat teams, especially when your Quez and your straight line speed is as good as it is. I like the idea of trying different things, trying to get your wide receivers involved behind the line of scrimmage. But one thing, can we just eliminate this from the play calling sheet forever? If you're in field goal range and you're right on the cusp of it, can we stop calling plays that start behind the line of scrimmage?
I totally agree. Yeah. So I'm with you that, get Quez Watkins the ball in space, let him use that speed. It wasn't working a lot, and you could tell Watkins was dancing too much, and they kept going back to it. So it was just the timing and just the execution of it overall. So hopefully it gets better, but a win is still a win. The Eagles are 13-1. We focus on the Dallas Cowboys this Saturday for Christmas Eve with Gardner Minshew under center. We'll take a first look at that matchup on Wednesday's edition of the show, plus crossover Thursday with Marcus Mosher and a Friday podcast as well. 5 days a week on all podcast platforms and on YouTube as well. And make sure you also follow Locked On Eagles on Twitter at Locked On Birds, at GC24_football, and at DiBiase LOE. Thank you for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Make sure your second listen is the Locked On Sports Today podcast, available on all podcast platforms. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. As always, thank you for downloading, thank you for watching and listening, and let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.